Cool. Hi, David. Thank you for your time today. As I mentioned to you, L2 Capital have a Telegram group, and we discuss economy, finance, and the few companies that we think could be good investment opportunities. I posted in this Telegram group a while back about Colonial Coal, and people would like to know more about the company. So, could you please tell us a little bit about Colonial Coal, and also could you tell us a little bit about yourself as well, as I think your experience is very important to the company.
Okay, well, maybe I'll do it the other way around. I'll start off. I'm not very good at talking about myself because what I think I've done and what I really did might be somewhat different. Uh, I, I I got into the coal business more by accident. I've been involved in some oil properties and some other properties, and I bumped into two gentlemen. One was Dave Fawcett and Kevin James. Uh, they've been working with an Australian group. One guy from Melbourne, Australia, and another guy from Perth, Australia, and they were taking a run at a major coal asset, which was in British Columbia. Uh, I suppose the best way to describe it is I got involved more because they came into our office. They were basically using space in our office. And then they asked us if we could help them structure the deal. And I started looking at it. I didn't participate financially on the deal, but I did end up spending quite a bit of time structuring the deal. And then I ended up going to London and helping them structure they went public on the London Exchange at the same time. There was a bunch of complications. In the end, to take it to a short ending, what they were trying to do, they failed. And then Dave Fawcett and Kevin James came to me and said that what they tried to do could have been done differently and an awful lot cheaper. And asked me if I wanted to get involved. And I said, well, yeah, I wouldn't mind getting involved, but because the word cheaper actually helped. These guys had lost about 20 million each. And I just, losing 20 million just didn't appeal to me in the slightest. So I said, well, yeah, what do you want? And they told me what they wanted. So I said, I can actually do that. And we got the money. We acquired the assets. And, to try and explain what actually happened was the Australian guys were trying to take a run at the company. And these guys said what was valuable was actually the coal in the ground. And we could actually go in and scoop the licenses and pick the properties up rather than pick the company up. And you know what? That's what we did. And that created Western Canadian Coal. We took it from inception. It was a very, very hard deal to do because nobody wanted to do a coal deal. Coal deals are not particularly popular in Canada. They seem to be more popular in Australia and in England. Anyhow, we went public. We went public with half the money. We were trying to raise 1.5 million. We actually raised 750,000, which was nowhere near enough to get us through and do what we needed to do. But we managed to do it. At the same time, I had another public company. And because we weren't able to do what I needed to do with Western, I actually started doing the other coal deal in the other company, which is called NEMI, Northern Energy and Mining. And so NEMI ended up with the Huguenot property, ended up with the Saxon property in the south, which was a big piece of property. And then Western Canadian Coal picked up the rest. And then over the next few years, we took it from the exploration program through permitting and then into production. Taking into production was probably one of the dumbest things I'd ever done, but we had to do what we needed to do at the time. And then Western, we took Wolverine, Mount Speaker, Brule, and Pine Valley Coal. We acquired Pine Valley Coal, and then NEMI we picked up Roman Trend Extension. Roman was actually called Windy Mountain, but the company that the Australians had gone after was a company called Denison, and it had been founded by a gentleman called Stephen Roman. Anyhow, Stephen Roman had died, and that's what put this whole area in flux, in a sense. And they'd gone after Denison Mines, and instead what we did is we actually picked up the properties and the licenses. Anyhow, we renamed Windy Mountain to Roman Mountain Yeah, basically after Stephen Roman, because this whole area, if it wasn't for Stephen Roman, wouldn't have existed. And then I took them both into production, and then Anglo America came in, looking at wanting to acquire assets in the area. At the same time, Australian companies came looking, Indian companies started coming. The first bid actually came in on Western Canadian Coal from an Indian company. They also bid on Western Coal. They also bid on NEMI, and then the whole thing took off, and Western sold for 3.3 billion, and NEMI sold for, I suppose, if you added up the whole thing, it was about 850 odd million. And I think NEMI netted somewhere around 400 million, somewhere in that region. And that's how I got involved in the coal business. And then what happened was I actually thought I was out of the coal business, and then something which didn't have happened, where the parent companies, which is let's say Anglo, Walter Energy. Walter Energy was the company that bought out Western. There was some kind of corporate disagreement. There was a joint venture partnership between the companies, and next thing I know is I'm back in business again, because a lot of the assets that belong to Western Canadian Coal and NEMI, which the licenses become available, and I pick them up, and that's what created Colonial Coal. And that's the history of how we put the companies together. And then we did quite a big program, a drill program on Huguenot. And then Flatbed became available for more or less the same reasons as Huguenot became available. And we did work programs on that. We've never told anybody that we're actually going to take into production. We've taken what Dave Fawcett, Kevin James, and myself did quite a lot of permitting before we took into production, but most of it was done with John Perry. John Perry is my chief operating officer, and the staff that did all the permitting for Western Coal and NEMI, and they're all the same staff that we have in Colonial Coal. So that's the brief history of Colonial Coal and where we are today. The drill programs have been done. We have about 700 million tons of coal. It's a premium coking coal. It's probably about one step down from peak downs. It is a good quality coking coal. The Chinese actually believe it's they call it a fat coal, which I'm not too sure if that's a polite name or not. But to them, it's considered a high quality coal. The coal in our area, when it gets sold, it goes predominantly to the Japanese who've been buying it for the last 40 years. They're also the people who buy the coal from Tecominco. This whole thing that's going on with Tecominco is having an effect on us, and we have about 17 NDNAs signed at the moment with different companies that are looking at us. What we're working on right now is to find the appropriate arrangement that we can do, whether it be the first bid, and we're trying to sell both properties at the same time, but there is a scenario where one property would get sold in one group and one property would get sold to another. Anyhow, I've spoken for about 6 minutes there. I'm going to stop, okay?
No, that's fantastic. Thank you for the update. And you mentioned John Perry. Could you please talk a little bit about your team as well and their experience?
Well, John Perry and Dave Fawcett and Kevin James all worked together. John Perry had worked for most of these drill programs in the area, in this particular area. Originally was the famous mining company in America. One of the famous companies is called the Kaiser family, Edward Kaiser. And they picked up these properties and they got up there. And this is not necessarily true, but it's what we hear, is when they were building the railroads, they frequently would find coal and then build the railroads to the coal, because they needed coal to run the trains. So when you look at the rail loops around North America, like for instance where our property is, if you look where it goes into Alberta, it goes towards Edmonton. It also goes right to another coal area. Now, they aren't all necessarily coking coal or metallurgical coal. A lot of times it's thermal coal. But the areas were developed, and then that allowed, the rail to come from from New York all the way across the Pacific. The Kaiser family were a very wealthy family. It became an asset of Denison, and then this whole thing kind of changed. But John Perry had worked for some oil and gas companies that were doing drill programs. Back in those days, a lot of the oil and gas companies were actually getting heavily involved in coal, just as part of an energy program. And so he then started working with Dave Fawcett and doing the work programs. And then Adriana and Christina, they are the people who do, everything has to be basically put through a series of different types of documentation. You have to have environmental studies. And as soon as you pick up your licenses, you have to have 2 years of historical data before you file for your permit. The permits have to meet a particular standard, what the government requires. And that's what their expertise is, or whatever. I'm trying to think of the right word there. But I think you understand it. The whole office administration is all built towards one thing: picking up the properties, maintaining the licenses, and then doing the environmental necessities to get those licenses permitted. Now, the permits are very much related to what size mine you're going to build. So let's say, Marcus, you came along and you said, I want to build a 2 million ton mine. Well, we would then develop the permitting for a 2 million ton. With Western Coal and NEMI, we realized that permitting the property had to be done. The proper way to do it is to make sure you did it for the size you were going for. None of our properties are small properties. These are not going to be 400,000 tons to 1 million tons per annum. These are going to be 4 million tons or better. And the requirement for environmental studies and how you do it, it's important that you get it right the first time. A lot of companies, including Glencors, fail because they do it the way they think it needs to be done. And really, you have to do it the way the government wants you to do it. And I know it sounds like we're kissing ass, but we realized earlier on that if you tick all the boxes and you send it through and you've done it exactly the way they've asked you to do it, it's better than get into a pissing match. After you've got your permits, you can modify them. And we found that it was easier to get your permit and modify them than it was to argue about getting them to modify the permits before you got them. And yeah, we've been very successful getting everything through permitting. And yes, there's absolutely no reason why we can't get these properties through the permitting, but it'll depend on who buys this and what size they want to go to.
Fantastic. We're going to talk about permit soon, but just so we are clear, there are a couple of properties there: Flatbed with around 300 million tons and Huguenot with 400 million tons. And just so we know, you're not planning on bringing these deposits to production, right? The idea here is to sell them both, and preferably to one company, right?
Right.
Okay. So where are you in the sale process? Do you have any expectations about when?
Yes, we've been in the sales process now for a couple of years. We have, matter of fact, the sales process started about January, February 2020. Unfortunately, COVID started this November, December 2019, more or less exactly when we started the sales process. And the first people that we'd actually were looking at doing a deal with was from a place called Wuhan. It turns out what they exported is something we didn't particularly want. And our arrangement with them carried on for as long as we could until they actually changed their management structure and they moved Wuhan Steel, merged with Bao Steel. Now, the other people who were looking at us was also Bao Steel, An Steel, and Fushan, the companies that were looking at us out of China. They still are. They've actually, what they've done is they've merged themselves into a group of 5, with one group now leading the 5. We have probably about 5 or 6 companies out of India, and we have a few companies out of America, and we have, some interest out of Australia.
Okay, interesting. And what if the sale process does not go as planned? If it takes too long or whatever, is there a plan B?
Well, yeah, the plan B, unfortunately, is also part of Plan A. Uh, Plan A is to sell both companies, both assets at the same time. If that doesn't work, then there is a way of doing Plan B, which is to actually separate the properties. We are working on Plan B at the same time as Plan A, because some of the companies that we're talking to, for some reason, and I don't really have a good explanation for this, but the Japanese companies are more inclined to get involved on open pit. They don't particularly like underground for some reason. I don't know. Things seem to be changing, but in the past, if we had open pit, they were interested. Underground, they're not. Uh, it's possible we could do a deal with one group which strictly wants the open pit. The Chinese have a preference for underground. They much prefer underground mining. So it's possible we could sell one off to one group and one to another. And that we are pursuing that at the same time. So there is a plan A and a plan B, and they're both working at the same time.
Okay. Now, recently, Teck refused the Glencore's takeover proposal. I think Glencore offered just over $8.2 billion for the coal business, and Teck has what, 800 million tons of coal or something like that. So
Yes.
if we do a quick calculation here, we see that Teck's coal business is trading at just over $10 a ton.
Mm-hmm.
If we use the same metric, Colonial is worth today in the stock market around 200 million US dollars.
Mm-hmm.
It has 700 million tons of coal. So the company should be trading today at something around 35 cents per ton. Is that right?
It's trading around 30 cents a ton. It's probably, when you look at the transactions, like for instance, Teck does have that with multiple different mines, but their mine life is coming to an end, and they still probably, realistically, there's quite a few different opportunities they have down there. They have a lot more environmental issues down south than we do. Selenium is a major issue down there, so opening up new mines is more of a challenge for them than it is for us. And I was at a conference with Teck, and they paid us kind of a backhanded compliment. They told people that if you wanted immediate production, come to see us. If you want long-term production, go see Colonial Coal. And they actually said that, And the irony is that's true, because when you look at our flatbed property, we've only drilled 20% of it, and we have 300 million tons. It's possible on flatbed we could get, let's say 1 or 2 shafts on the property, and we could easily get to 8 million tons off that one property alone. And then you look at Huguenot, if Anglo, depending on what happens with Anglo, but if Anglo sells, the Huguenot asset was the prime assets that we used to own in Western Coal and NEMI. It was the joint venture. We called it the Belcourt-Saxon joint venture. And it was the property that Anglo bought us out for. And Anglo's ambition was to put Belcourt into production. Well, the Belcourt River actually runs through Huguenot. And the idea was that, the Belcourt property could do, potentially, if you really, really went nuts, you could do up to about 16 million tons per annum. It is a massive deposit. If you take Anglo's deposit, which continues with ours, it's to the north part of the Huguenot property, we have 400 million tons. On paper, they have about 100 million tons. In reality, because of the drill program we've done, we drilled right along the border. We know that they have probably at least another 400 million tons on their property, which means that that deposit has probably got about 1 billion tons on it. It's part of the sales process that's been going on. The challenge you have is Walter Energy, and when Walter Energy bought out the partnership, within a very short period of time, they ran into financial problems, and that's, in a sense, what brought Colonial Coal into existence. Because if those errors hadn't happened, we couldn't have picked up those properties. But it's because of people having financial difficulties that we became a bit opportune. We took our opportunity and scooped them. But if Huguenot Belcourt are probably some of the best properties in Canada.
Got it. And what would be an acceptable price for the company in your opinion?
Well, I try to say stupid things, and I'm very successful at doing it. So I'll do it again. I Western Canadian Coal, and we sold it for $3.3 billion. We were exceptionally lucky, and we took the money and we ran. With NEMI, we were dealing with Anglo, and Anglo was let's say more pragmatic and more realistic about what they paid, and they paid us $2 a ton in the ground. And in their own documentation, they implied that they actually thought they got it cheap. If you were to take their statement and say, would I sell our property again for $2 a ton in the ground? The answer is yes. I think that would be a good starting point. And at $2 a ton, that's 1.4 billion US. That's a good starting point. But if somebody threw $1 a ton on the table and said, okay, let's start from there, I'd have to probably start the process. And so yes, so it's going to go from $1 a ton in the ground. My expectations are, when you look at what happened with that deal that happened last week, which I shouldn't have brought that up because I can't remember the name of it now. If you look at the mathematics on that, that was roughly about $4 a ton in the ground. So if transactions are going anywhere from $2 to $4 a ton, ours is a premium coking coal. The coal that sold last week was not a premium coking coal. It was on the bottom scale of coking coal. Some of it was PCI, some of it was thermal. All our coal is a premium coking coal.
Got it. So $1.4 billion is a 7 times return from where we are today, right?
Yep.
Got it. So what's your cash position today, and what's the cash burn of the company?
Well, at different times of the year, it's a different amount. It's just slightly over $2 million a year. We've got about 18 months in the till right at the moment. It probably will go slightly up a little bit. We do have certain things that we got some money coming back from taxes and a few other things. So, but I'd say 18 months is about it.
Okay. And are you just going to sit and wait, or do you have plans to do any more drilling with using this money and more? No. Okay. And if you, sorry, go ahead.
The only thing which we will do is we have to maintain our environmental. And so that can go up, and things change environmentally. The government changes some of the regulations. They frequently have it, and we got a little bit lucky in the last couple of weeks. I'm not sure. I don't have time to explain it to you, so I'll try and do it quickly. The government brought in some bills over the last few years. One was called Bill C-69, which covered environmental and mining from a federal government point of view, which overlapped into the federal. Well, the provincial, the Supreme Court just threw those regulations out, which has been very helpful because we all try and maintain and meet the specs, but when the specs became a bit too difficult, we've always been able to succeed. But now that they've thrown those regulations out, I'm sure they'll replace them. Have I lost you?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I can see me, and I don't really want to see me.
Yep. No. I'm putting you here so you can talk to
Okay.
us.
Anyhow,
I'm back.
Yeah. So the environmental stuff that has to be taken care of. We have to fly people up there. At a reasonably steady rate. There's a very expensive pieces of equipment on the property, and if anybody watched the Game of Thrones, did you ever watch it?
I never watched it. I've heard about it.
Well, at the end, when they finished the Game of Thrones, what they did is they put a set of one of the thrones, which is the actual sword, the throne, which is made out of swords. They placed one in Australia, I think one in Canada, and people had to find them. One of the thrones was actually on flatbed property. So if you look up the Game of Thrones and look up the flatbed property or Tumbler Ridge, you'll see it literally on the property. Well, it's right beside a stream. Everything which we do, the environmental stuff, tends to be the most difficult hurdle that most of the, especially major mining companies, seem to get themselves bogged down on. And it's been the one thing that we've been able to work our way through. And it's not really me, it's really the staff, John Perry, Adriana, Christina, they're the ones who really do the majority of the work to make sure that when we file the applications, they're done properly. Having a good working relationship with the government and having a good relationship with the First Nations is really paramount to the success of all coal companies in Canada. I've been very lucky. I had a good relationship with the First Nations right from the get-go. I did something which, I suppose helped me establish the coal companies by treating the First Nations the way they should be treated. They said no, which is kind of an irony, but I did offer it to them. And later in life, they came back and said, we should have taken what you offered. And I said, well, it's there on the table. So this time round, we had already been polite the first time, and so it wasn't difficult to do the same time. And we've done it over and over again. We just realized that they're such an important part of the province, and an important part of our success.
Got it. It's good that you touched the subject, because your neighbor Sukumka didn't get approval. I spoke to Glencors a while back, and they said it's very difficult to get First Nations green light. And besides, they had the caribou issue. And so why are your projects different? Is it the team? And why would you get Colonial projects approved and Glencors, which is one of the biggest commodity companies in the world, couldn't?
We actually advised them how to do it. They didn't take our advice. Yeah. Okay, Mark. Let's say, for instance, you had the Sekunka property and you came to us. There's certain things that you have to know. There is caribou, and caribou are an issue in Northeast Coal. With Western Canadian Coal and with NEMI, we had to deal with caribou. So we looked at what do we need to do to safeguard the caribou habitat and to enhance the caribou habitat. So we got together with the First Nations and we established a new herd, and we brought in a herd with the same rough DNA as the caribou herd from this particular area. And so the caribou herd that we're talking about is called the quintet herd. And the quintet herd goes from more or less the quintet round loadout right through to just a bit south of Chetwynd. South of that is a completely different herd, and that herd is nowhere near in difficulty as the quintet herd is. It's the quintet herd, but the quintet herd is doing exceptionally well. The problem is their habitat is Sekunka. That's where they live. And they get attracted to mine sites because mine sites, generally we don't allow shooting. It's like if you build a mine and I build a mine, the first thing that will have guests move in will be caribou, because they know that in that environment they're not going to get shot. As soon as you leave the mine area, they have a tendency to run into bullets. And it's an unfortunate thing with the caribou habitat in that area that death by bullet seems to be quite common, but they're quite safe on the property. Flatbed is not an issue because it's an underground mine. Huguenot property is not in the same herd area. So one we don't have to deal with at all because it's a different herd. We still have to take care of caribou habitat in both environments, but one is more severe than the other, and so flatbed, which would be the one that's the most challenging because it's an underground mine, caribou haven't yet figured out how to go down to an underground mine. If they ever do, we might be in trouble. But at the moment, the surface is not much of an issue. We're within a very short distance of Tumbler Ridge, where there's a road that goes right across the top, which is the old loadout road from Quintet. The rail goes across the top. So we're actually in a very an area that the caribou don't particularly frequent at the best of times. They do go across it. We monitor. We have all the caribou up there have tracking devices, which we actually pay for, and it shows them moving from one property to another. At the bottom end of the flatbed property, some of the things which I'll share with you, not necessarily it's a wise thing to do, but when you look at picking up coal licenses in our area, if you go and look at the data that's out there, which shows you where the caribou habitat is, and we do this, we'll pick up the licenses and then we give back the licenses to government for caribou habitat. And we say, we recognize that caribou need to have the habitat, and we'll pick up the property and we'll give it back to the government, basically as caribou habitat. And that allows us to go ahead and develop our property with the government supporting us. It's just a strategy, but it's been quite successful. When Glencors came to see us, we told them that, we could actually help them submit their documentation differently from what they've done. But they went ahead and they did it in any case.
Amazing. Okay. And David, why is it taking so long for this company to be sold? You mentioned, COVID, but do you think it can be a problem with, I don't know, government regulations, or the fact that Canada is not getting along with India and China at the moment? What's going on?
Some of those are exactly right. We had a very good relationship, and a lot of things were going quite well less than 3 months ago. And then about 6 weeks ago, we had a group of Indian companies come in. And then literally, I was supposed to be going back to India. And then our Prime Minister got in a pissing match with India, and my visa was cancelled. And then also the people from India were coming, their visas were cancelled. And it was in the last 24 hours, the government's reversed their position. I now can get my visa, and the two of the companies that were coming in to see us that couldn't get their visas, they both contacted us last night and said that now that there was a particular word they picked. I can't remember what the word was right now, but they basically said that their visa applications had now been accepted. And so the door kind of opened up back in the last 24 hours, the door actually opened back up again. The Chinese have taken this as an opportunity for them to get their nose ahead. And they are quite a bit ahead now, because they're now down to looking at ways of structuring a deal. With the Indians, the problem we have, which is going to sound racist, and I've got to be very careful because I do say some really strange things. I don't mean it as an offense, but the Japanese and the Koreans, the Chinese deal with coal companies in Canada very differently than the Indian companies do. And unfortunately, I have first-hand contact with this. Now, I do have Mr. Bhattacharya on the board, and he was the chairman and CEO of CIL, and Coal of India Limited. And Coal of India Limited is the biggest producer and the biggest user of coal in the world. I dealt with CIL, with Western Coal and NEMI, and we did sell coal to both companies sold coal to them, and they were necessarily the most difficult country to deal with by far. And all the problems, the major problems that we had in both companies, you could actually say India was a major part of it. The Japanese are the absolute opposite. They were always easy to deal with. They gave us a premium price for our coal, and they supported us at all times. The Indian companies were the complete opposite, but they also were the first people to put the bids in. JSW is making an offer to buy out some assets in Tech Cominco. They will have challenges. Originally, they were going to try and buy 80%. They dropped it down to 40%, and I think I heard somewhere that they're having difficulties now, and it looks like they've been let's say, stonewalled one way or the other. Tecominco does not need to sell an offtake agreement to any other countries but the Japanese and the Koreans. They will buy all the coal coming out of British Columbia, and they will pay a premium for it. If coal was selling for $200 a ton, they pay $205. They're quite happy to pay the premium because that makes them less dependent on Australia. They like the coal quality they're getting, and they like having it like let's say, a little nest egg that they benefit from, away from being dependent on Australia or elsewhere. And yeah, it's where we're at the moment.
Got it. David, anything else you think it's important to mention and we didn't touch on it today?
Yeah, we are getting interest out of Australia. Australia is now, obviously, there's people who are quite famous in Australia are focusing on southwest Alberta. I think they did that because on paper, it was a conservative government, and conservative governments tend to treat coal companies better than socialist governments, like ours is called the NDP. I don't find that true. I find that I have to deal with both political parties, and I treat them equally as well. It wasn't quite the word I was going to use, but it's going to do. And I find that, especially in British Columbia, the major contributor to our tax system is coal companies. So both governments, whether it be NDP or the Conservative government, and our Conservative government can't make up its mind what it's calling itself. It used to be the Social Credit, then it became the Liberal Party, and they've now decided to be called the United Party. And I'm not too sure, but why they just couldn't call themselves conservatives and get on with it. But I do like the fact that both parties in this province in the past have all supported me. It doesn't matter if it's been the NDP or the Conservative governments. They do support me because they realise that it's a major source of tax revenue. It's also a massive amount of jobs come from our coal mines. If we create 300 to 600 jobs on the mine site, by the time it gets to the port, it's created another 300 to 600 jobs from the mine site to the port. So it's a big influence on. And then if you look at Tecominco, they paid over $1 billion in taxes to the province, and that's all direct money in. If you're in the lumber business or any other business, you actually get some of your money back from the government, like stumpage fees and a bunch of other fees. And the coal companies, you don't. You get to write the check, and you don't get anything back. You just get a bit of a verbal abuse every so often because they blame everything on coal companies.
Sure. David, listen, once again, many thanks for spending time with us today and for all the information about Colonial Coal. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Oh, no problem. Please do. And if anybody has a question, my email address is daustin@ccoal.ca. You feel free to send me an email. I'm known for giving some of the shortest replies in history. If I could get it down to one letter, I would. But I will take time to reply to you. The process is going very well at the moment on the sales side. I will be traveling again next week, and we're expecting 2 or 3 of the Indian companies to be into Vancouver, and we're expecting the Chinese companies to come back, and we'll get this thing done.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, David. I'll talk to you soon.
My pleasure. Thank you. Bye-bye.